During the first half of 2024, there have been more than 300 mass shootings in the United States. According to the folks that keep the statistics, this country is still averaging more than one mass shooting each day. That means that we could break over 500 mass shootings for the 5th year in a row. Kelley Drane, the director of the Giffords Law Center, which advocates for justice and legislative reform of gun laws, believes that these mass shootings are preventable. And she states that states with stronger gun laws have fewer gun deaths. Hello, I'm Brent Carlson. Welcome to Brethren Voices. According to Wikipedia, American attitudes on gun ownership date back to the American Revolutionary War and also arise from traditions of hunting, militia, and frontier living. The American hunting and sporting passion comes from a time when the United States was an agrarian and subsistence nation, where hunting was a profession for some. And owning a gun led to a source of food for some settlers and also a deterrence to animal predators. A connection between shooting skills and survival among rural American men was in many cases a necessity and a rite of passage for manhood. However, guns were also necessary for the westward expansion of America in conquering the native populations. Firearms made the domination of others and the occupation of their lands a reality. Wikipedia statistics show that Americans with 4% of the world's population own about 46% of the entire global stock of 850 million civilian firearms. U.S. civilians own about 393 million guns, which is more guns than those held by civilians combined in the other top 25 developed countries. According to Gallup, in 2020, 32% of American adults said they personally own a gun, while 44% report living in a household where there is a gun. In 2023, on average, 118 people each day died from a gun-related incident. Annually, another 100,000 people are wounded by guns nationally. Mike Stern has been an advocate for love, peace, and justice during his life. We have featured Mike and his music on other Brethren Voices programs, and we're fortunate to cross paths with him again. This crossing occurred in July of 2023, but his thoughts continue to be timely today.
It was 20 years ago that Carol and I were returning home to Seattle after a vacation on the Olympic Peninsula. And we had boarded the Bainbridge Island Seattle ferry and settled into a booth on the passenger deck when a woman with leaflets in her hand approached us and said, "Do you want to know how Muslims are trying to subvert our Christian principles and take over the United States?" I was tired, and my inclination was simply to say no thanks and be done with it. But before I could react, Carol replied, "Certainly not." The woman seemed surprised and said, she started to back off while muttering that she knew a lot more than we did about Muslim threats to our way of life. But a minute later, she was back and kept advancing towards us, saying that we had no right to be so smug in declining her leaflet. And she got so far into our personal space that I felt I had to stand up and say quietly but firmly, "You need to leave us alone." Again, she backed away, but with each step backwards, she increased the volume of her tirade. Soon, she was shouting so loudly that everyone in that part of the ferry was watching intently. Finally, she leveled this trio of accusations at us. She said, "I suppose you oppose our president on the war in Iraq, and you probably support gun control. And saving her most vitriolic and loudest insult for last, she shouted, "And I'll bet you support gay marriage too." I thought to myself, okay, at least she's backing off, and she's made a big enough fool of herself to make many of the observers in the ferry start to snicker. But Carol, bless her heart, was less inclined to leave it at that. You might say Carol is more supportive, or I meant to say Carol is more assertive in that kind of situation than I, or perhaps that I am more cowardly. Though I prefer to say I'm just more prayerful. Indeed, I said a little prayer right then and there. I prayed, "Dear God, please don't let Carol say anything else." But as is often the case, God answers our prayers in ways we don't expect, and many times without giving us specifically what we've asked for. As the woman finished her accusations about what she correctly assumed about us on the issues of war, gun control, and gay marriage, Carol replied with perfect timing, "You are absolutely correct, and on all three." Now, as I prepared to tell this story, which happened so long ago, I've rewritten it several times, and this week, usually I just called it a story about Carol. But being that it's the 4th of July weekend, I think maybe I should call it, "She holds these truths to be self-evident." Also, the story has different possible endings that I've been considering. The one which I like the most is that the spectators in the ferry burst into appreciative laughter or applause. So it was Carol's quick wit and confidence to stand up for these issues that clearly won out over the other person's biases. However, the ferry audience's reaction might not have been as boisterous as I would like to believe. We know that LGBTQ plus rights are frequently, if not constantly, being assaulted, and that gay marriage is far from being universally accepted today. And I was going to say, and even less so 20 years ago, but with recent Supreme Court decisions, I don't know if I can say even less so 20 years ago, but, and on a similar note, 20 years ago, when the US first entered the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, anti-war sentiments were far from popular. Nor has public support for effective gun control ever been strong enough in this country to implement legislative action on a national level. So on the topic of guns, if I had brought my banjo too along with my other two guitars today, I would have sung this song, "You Don't Have to Carry a Gun," which I wrote several wars ago to help remind people, young people in particular, that there are conscientious alternatives to taking up weapons of war. You're 18 years old, war seems far away, may seem an adventure or honest day's pay, but when innocent die, no victory's won. You don't have to carry a gun when the innocent die. When the innocent die, no victory's won. You don't have to carry a gun. Maybe your country says that you should. Maybe the president thinks that it's good, but maybe's not enough reason when all said and take you, God, it's only begun. But you don't have to carry a gun. They will try to take you, they will try to take you, God, it's only begun. But you don't have to carry a gun. It takes courage to stand up for what you think's right. It takes wisdom to know more than one way to fight. It may take many people, but it starts with just one. You don't have to carry a gun. It takes courage. It takes courage to stand up for what you think's right. It takes wisdom to know more than one way to fight. It may take many people, but it starts with just one. You don't have to carry a gun. It may take many people, but it starts with just one. You don't have to carry a gun. Now, the song takes on additional meaning when it comes to gun violence in this country today. But let's look back to the time of Jesus. Guns had not been invented yet, nor had cannons, missiles, or nuclear weapons. The first recorded use of a firearm appears to have been in 1364, well past the time of Jesus and the time that the Bible was written. So if you're looking for a specific prohibition or justification, for that matter, that's about guns, you ain't gonna find one in the Bible. However, there are plenty of other references in the Bible to other weapons, more specifically swords and spears, and very specific admonitions against acts of hatred and violence, such as those in today's words of meditation and the scripture readings. Thou shalt not kill, nation shall not make war against nation, study war no more, lay down your weapons, because those who pick up the sword will die by the sword. And Jesus said, I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Those of us who call ourselves Christian have to interpret Scripture in light of history-altering and present-day developments to consider gospel themes as a whole. And even apart from the biblical teachings, I want to just mention a few other common sense reasoning issues about guns and the human condition. Anger affects everyone at times and can result in impulsive bursts of angry words, even in the best of us. Mistaken assumptions or mistaken identities, like in the ballad of the cookie thief, are commonplace occurrences in our lives. You may have even recognized something of yourself in the punchline of that song. I can certainly recognize it in myself. And then there are much more ominous expressions of anger we all have witnessed in the news, or perhaps in person, such as road rage, spinning out of ridiculously minor incidents, or parents who attack umpires in Little League games, and countless other examples of rage. Also, there's this predictable feature of human development when adolescents demonstrate in certain years of their life that false sense of invulnerability associated with risk-taking behavior with potentially lethal effects, especially when and I used to say this as a nurse practitioner in college health, especially when it comes to driving, alcohol, drug use, and what? Weapons, guns, yes. And abusive relationships, anger management problems, suicide ideation, and mental illness are all, to put it mildly, widespread. Racist and xenophobic attitudes and this us, them, or take no prisoners mentality is bad enough on its own. But add easy access to guns into this mix, particularly AR-style assault weapons that are so widely available in the United States. And what do you get? Mass shootings.
Mike Stern's songs are anthems for an America that we wish it would be. His songwritings are reminders of peace and justice, which we hold to the highest value. He shares the story behind his song, Requiem for Uvalde.
On May 24th, just over a year ago, 2022, 19 fourth grade students who were aged 8 to 11 and their 2 teachers were murdered at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. And their shooter had just turned 18 1 week earlier. He immediately started purchasing firearms and ammunition legally, I should add. And he persuaded his uncle to drive him to a gun store where he spent more than $5,000 on 2 AR-15 style rifles, ammunition, and other gear that were used at the school shooting just a few days later. Robert Frost once said that a poem begins with a lump in the throat. That's often been true when I write songs. But last spring, when this music welled up from that lump in my throat, it felt as if what had happened was too terrible for words. So this song has no words, just the music, accompanied by murals that were painted by various artists in Uvalde. And they are in loving memory of the 21 victims. It's called Requiem for Uvalde. is there so much resistance to any kind of limits on the manufacture, sale, and ownership of semi-automatic assault weapons? Is the Second Amendment more important than everything else in the US Constitution? The Second Amendment, by the way, is only one of 27 amendments that are part of the Constitution. And it was ratified in 1791, again, well before the invention of semi-automatic machine guns and assault rifles. Yet many people hold on to it as tightly or more so than any other part of the US Constitution, or any religious belief for that matter. We need to be asking ourselves, each other, and our elected officials, and our Supreme Court, what is so special about the right to manufacture, sell, and bear assault rifles? Is that interpretation of the Second Amendment more important than children's lives?
I found that collage of art not only beautiful, but very hard to watch, knowing that each of the lives of the 22 victims in Uvalde was precious, as are those of all of the victims of gun violence in this country and around the world. We close this edition of Brethren Voices with a song. Let's Find a Loving Way, written by Mike's friend Jeff Morgan. This is Brent Carlson, wishing you peace. Please pass it on.
Lay down the sword, lay down the gun, and you answer, let's find a loving way. Now wait, oh brothers and sisters, the time has come to find a loving way. Don't look at the chorus yet, I'm just doing verses. But they're like litanies where you sing every other line is the same. We're trained to fight and trained to kill. Let's find a loving way. Let the war machine now be still. Let's find a loving way. Now the chorus. Loving way, loving way. Let's find a loving way. Loving way, loving way. Let's find a loving way. Oh, once they laughed, now here they lie. Let's find a loving way. Let no one else in this way die. Let's find a loving way. The roles we play are where it starts. Let's find a loving way and turn the stone into a heart. Let's find a loving way. Chorus. Loving way, loving way. Let's find a loving way. Loving way, loving way. Let's find a loving way. Lay down the sword, lay down the gun. Let's find a loving way. Oh, brothers and sisters, the time has come to find a loving way. One more chorus. Loving